Face of a stranger, quiet observer, never get too close. I see the world, but it's through this window. Another side to see, I'm ready to know. Not every story's written on a eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. He's from the city, she's from the south. Two different chapters told miles out. The back row living in his White House. So many stories that I need to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. So many stories right in front of me. Some people climb to heights I've never seen. Too many falling down off their feet. These stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you tiptoe around with face of a stranger, quiet observer, never get too close. I see the world, but it's through this window. Another side to see, I'm ready to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. He's from the city, she's from the south. Two different chapters told miles out. The back row living in his White House. So many stories that I need to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. right in front of me. Some people climb to heights I've never seen. Too many falling down off their feet. These stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Tiptoe around with face of a stranger. Quiet observer, never get too close. I see the world, but it's through this window. Another side to see, I'm ready to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. Miles out, that back row living in his white house. So many stories that I need to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. So many stories right in front of me. Some people climb to heights I've never seen. Too many falling down off their feet. These stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Tiptoe around with face of a stranger. Quiet observer, never get too close. I see the world, but it's through this window. Another side to see, I'm ready to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? stories written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Silverline Wednesday Wham. My name is Dean Zachary, and I'm your guide and your host tonight. I'm a writer, penciler for Silverline Comics. And tonight, before we get started, I'd like to thank our producer, Carlos, who makes this show possible with his technical expertise. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Daytona Beach Comic Convention, being held this year on September 18th and 19th. We have some cool guests with us tonight. And tonight's subject is a little bit more on the writer side of things. We're going down the writer's rabbit hole, as I like to call it, rather than the usual artistic conversation, although there'll probably be some art discussed as well. We are going to talk about conflict and character, and we're going to talk about both internal conflict and external conflict. And we're also going to be talking about some of the more popular comic book shows right now, particularly in terms of television. We're going to talk about Loki, and we're going to talk about Black Widow and the internal external conflicts of those characters and what we learn from them and how we apply them to our own characters. But before we dive in, I'd like to hand some introduction time over to our guests. So we're going to start with ladies first here. Miss Barbara Kelberg, introduce yourself and give a quick background, if you would.
I am Barbara Kalberg, and I've been an inker in comics for over 30 years with a wide variety of projects under my belt, over 200. And I am currently working for Silverline in several capacities. I'm the CFO, I'm inking Cat and Mouse, I'm coloring Sirens, and I am the creator, co writer, inker, and colorist on my own book, Divinity.
And a great book it is, an award-winning book, as a matter of
Award-winning
fact.
book. Thank
So
you.
we encourage you guys to go out and try it out. Issue 2 just came out. Is that correct?
That's correct, and it did
Yes.
really, really well. So
Excellent.
I was very, very pleased with that. And
Fantastic. Fantastic. I also want to pass now on to Mr. Aaron Humphreys. Hi, Aaron. Tell us who
Hey,
you are and what you do for Silverline.
I am the penciler on Fire Rush, which I think is finishing up. We should have the last Kickstarter for the last issue, hopefully soon.
Awesome.
And then I'm working on a new comic called The Obsoletes that I am pretty close to being done with that. And then I'm also working on my Goblins comic, which I post on Webtoons, and that's getting done. So I'm finishing up with this first issue of Obsoletes, and then I'm finishing up my entire Goblin series, hopefully by the beginning of fall. I think so.
Awesome. Well, that
Yeah,
is
yeah, so it'll be done.
very cool. Well,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and get started here. Aaron, I'm going to let you sort of talk to us about your book, and we're going to bring up a visual for it. Your book is called Godlings, and
Yeah.
kind of set the stage for us about Godlings before we get into how you created the characters and your inspiration and all that good stuff.
So the setting was there's a kind of a long history. So the setting is basically I think a sci-fi fantasy. It's about these three teenage godlings that don't want to be gods. They're errant teenagers. They go off and have fun. And that's not allowed, and so they end up causing kind of a rebellion back in the realm of the gods and end up causing a lot of destruction inadvertently by their actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the setting. So part of it, the when they're in the realm of the gods, that's more the sci-fi setting. And then when they're on like the planets they make, that's more of a fantasy setting. So I like sci-fi and fantasy, so I find a way to mix both.
Of
Uh,
course, of
you know.
course.
Um, so yeah, and the gods not based on any sort of modern religion or whatever. They're completely sci-fi. They're just these incredibly advanced beings that decided to make their own universe and go into it. And then they are and that's what I'm working on now is a discussion that explains why they created the universe and why there's this absolute strict order in the book that nobody can have personal choice and why that is.
Hmm.
And it's a philosophical bit. So that's what I'm working on now as far as the end of issue 11. So
Okay, so talk just a little bit about when you were concepting the three teenage godlings. You know, we all know from school, you know, conflict makes for an interesting
right.
character, but not just external, like who they're in conflict with or what they're in conflict with, but also internal. So, talk a little bit about the characters themselves and the internal and external conflict.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually my first iteration of writing the story is back in like high school, out of high school, and it's changed over the years. And in fact, I have written this story before, and I had the book. It's over there. I've actually already finished the series once. This is the second time redoing the series.
Okay.
Um, so so my characters are just basically the idea. Boomer, my original protagonist, the main protagonist, is the god of thunder. And I just chose Thunder because he's impulsive. Thunder's impulsive, like a strike of lightning. He's a hothead, and of course, through the course of the story, he learns humility, which is a general story arc or character arc of most stories. The person's a hothead. He gains humility as it goes along. My other character, Doom, who's the god of the warrior spirit, basically the god of the warriors or whatever. He's
Hmm.
just more the silent protagonist. I don't do much with him. I should. A lot of people really like him. Crystal, the other one who is the female god, she is the opposite of Boomer. So if Boomer's hot headed and impulsive, she's more calm and decisive. So those two balance each other out.
Right.
And
Right.
she's kind of an important part of the story as it goes along. And then there's an actual princess who is more like a kind of a princess of empathy and stuff. And there's a king and there's lots of other characters. But the three main protagonists are kind of like just this group of gods that just they want to do their own thing. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
So their external conflict is really breaking the rules, so to speak, which really
right,
speaks to the teenage rebellion mentality and so
exactly.
on. Right.
Don't smoke. Teenager's gonna go smoke.
Right. Right. The whole
Don't put your
thing.
hand on the stove. Teenager's
Yeah.
gonna
Put your
put
hand on the
the
stove.
kid.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that
So that's your external. Do any of them say have maybe regrets or second thoughts about what they're doing?
yes. Crystal's the one that questions a little bit. She's the one that's the most unsure about what they're doing. And I think she's a little naive. She thinks, oh, we're just going to have some fun and then it'll be over. And she didn't realize they end up, and this is not too big of a reveal, they end up through the course of it getting in trouble enough that they kill almost an entire city. They decimate
Ooh,
like thousands of people and kill thousands of people.
wow.
And Boomer's one of the only ones to survive. And so the last part of the story is him dealing with the consequences of, because I mean, if I wanted to use the idea of the sort of the gray area where like everybody wants freedom, everybody wants to be free,
Sure.
but what if there's a consequence that's so outrageous and so horrible that you start to question that? He
Right.
got it. He got
Right.
it by literally decimating where he was coming from.
Okay.
And then the last is his kind of coming to terms with what he has done. And there's more other secrets or whatever to do it. But it's almost that rebellious streak. And I wanted to actually write into the story. There's a good reason why there's not choice. There's not choice in the realm of the gods because they are dictators or something. That's not why it is. And you read through it, you'll find out that there is a good reason, but it's not. They start to see personal flaws in it. You kind of have to read it. It's kind of a personal choice. Um, but basically, it just really quickly, the gods run the universe in a system of perfect order. The
Hmm.
idea that if entropy or chaos, most things in science, everything goes from order to disorder.
Right.
So the best way to keep the universe living as long as possible, the creation, is to keep everything in order, to take care of it in perfect order, and it'll survive longer. So choice is a way of introducing disorder into an orderly system. In other words, so every god is born to do a specific role. So kind of like the idea of a computer. If all of a sudden you had say your motherboard decided it wanted to be a fan, then your computer would just shut down. Everything has to do its part to make the computer the whole. Same thing in this. Every god has to do their part to make the universe run the way it is. So if somebody decides not to do this, it just is like this systemic like illness that runs through it. And so of course nobody in the story can have choice because it's like a virus. Once somebody gets choice, it starts spreading almost like free will wanting to do this. But they're doing it in order to keep things alive and keep things going. So it's not because they're mean, it's an altruistic reason.
So there's really 3 steps, if I'm understanding it correctly. The first step is free will puts the balance in danger. And then, but the answer is not collectivism. It's not a robotic adherence to a set of rules at the loss of your individuality. It's more, you can have free will up to the point of an accountability mechanism, right? So the accountability mechanism in your case is keeping the universe going as long as possible before entropy and chaos consume it.
Right. They basically, and this is not to give away, not anybody. They basically, the gods, their universe was dying.
Yeah.
And this is advanced realm that figured out that the universe is collapsing. There's 2 ways the universe idea is multiple, 2 big ones: the big collapse or the big freeze of our modern universe. I took a variation on the collapse, which is basically means if the universe is expanding, eventually get to a point where it cannot hold its form and it'll just collapse back in. So the universe is actually a pulsating universe. This is a real theory. So I took a variation on that. I didn't go straight scientific, but I took a variation on that. So these gods are trying to escape. How do you escape that? They created another universe, and they just went inside of it. But to make sure that fate didn't happen again, how do we stop it? Well, they realized the universe is going to decay over time. You cannot stop that, but you can really slow it down if everyone does what they're told, and that's why they do it. So it's almost kind of so it also goes back to personal choice of like, you can do all of these things in your life to make yourself live as long as possible and not do personal things that you want to do. But if you're not enjoying life, what's the purpose of living a long life?
Right. So it's about a balance.
Right. And mentally, so their character wise, that's what comes into their characters. My characters are going like, they're arguing. One is like, we need to live as long as possible. And the other one's like Boomer and stuff, his eternal conflict is like, well, why? If I can't do what I want, what's the point of doing all this in the first place?
Right.
So that's the kind of eternal conflict between the 2.
Yeah.
They're fighting over. Yeah.
Total free will versus accountable free will. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very good. Very heady stuff. Fun. You got such a fun style, and to have all this sort of philosophical, heady discussion underlying it is really cool. I mean, it gives it this cool foundation.
Yeah, I tried to actually write it mostly. My minor, I almost had a major in college in philosophy.
Yeah, I can tell.
So I tried to break it down so young adults can get it, because the idea was like, this stuff is very interesting. I mean, when you talk to young kids about philosophy and about those ideas, I mean, they're fun conversations because nobody knows. Everybody have your best guess. So I don't see that a lot in comics. That's one reason why I wrote this. I didn't see a lot of comics dealing with straight up philosophical arguments. Not the way. So I'm like, well, could I write one like that? And that's what I did.
It's interesting you say that. That's kind of what I'm addressing with Silverblade, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the show. But I want to move along now to Barb. And Barb, tell us a little bit about. We've covered a lot of plot dynamics in previous episodes or streams about your characters, but in this one, I'd really love to hear about the internal conflicts of your 3 main characters. Like, what are their struggles internally?
Yeah, mine's not quite as deep as Aaron's.
Sorry.
Mine are pretty much ordinary, everyday human struggles. And that was one of the big things that I wanted to keep in the book, was that I wanted this to be a book about ordinary people, just like you run across on the street every day, and thrown into an extraordinary circumstance, with divinity having the power to heal. Divinity's internal struggle obviously is going to be, she's 11 years old. She doesn't understand what's going on around her,
Sure.
So she's confused. She's angry. She's belligerent. She's scared. All the things an 11-year-old girl would be, who suddenly discovers that not only does she have this amazing power, but now all these people are after her. So, oh, excuse me. So she finds herself constantly in emotional flux. And if you have ever been around a preteen or a teen, this is pretty much the normal state of affairs
Right.
um, with them. So her internal dialogue is all over the place. And her external, of course, is that she's on the run from bad people who want to do bad things to her. She's also in a position where she is under the care of a brother she really doesn't really know. I mean, they're something like 11 years apart in age. She's 11, he's 26. No, that's more than 11. Oh,
15, right?
15 years apart
Yeah,
in age. So he's almost old enough to be her father.
sure.
So she finds herself confronted with an older brother who's been gone a good portion of her life, her memory of life, because at 11 you don't remember stuff when you're 3 and 4. And he's been in the Marines since he was 18. So she's having to adapt to another authority figure, and she resents that fact very much, that she's got to take orders from a brother she barely knows. And there's all kinds of conflict that's going to raise its ugly head in that regard. And the same goes for Zach. He's found himself now in the position of being a parent. He never asked for it. He wanted to be a Marine for the full 20 and beyond. The Marines were his life, and suddenly he's thrown into the role of being a parent. And he starts out kind of unlikable. I mean, he's kind of ugly at the beginning because he is very resentful to this little girl for pulling him out of his dream and thrusting him into the role of a caretaker. He never asked for it. He doesn't know how to do this job. And some of that resentfulness comes from fear because while he may be a Marine and used to tackling all kinds of heavy-duty things, parenthood was not one of them, especially to a belligerent little 11-year-old. He has no idea what he's doing. And that comes out as anger a lot, which just feeds a fire in this situation. He's frustrated. He's angry. He doesn't know what's going on. He's kind of scared of Divinity's powers. He kind of thinks she's a freak at the beginning, and it takes a near loss of her in issue number 2 for him to realize that he really does care about her, and that they start to build a relationship then and look upon each other. He doesn't look upon her as his half sister anymore. Through the first and second issue, or part of the second issue, he keeps referring to her as his half sister, and then by the end of the second issue, she's just his sister because he has accepted his role in her life. Doesn't mean things are smooth sailing now by any means, but his internal conflict is learning to adjust to his new circumstances and trying to overcome his fear of screwing up. Obviously, his external is again the bad guys after Divinity, and he's also starting to feel very protective towards her because she's a harmless and helpless little 11-year-old, or so we think.
So we think, yeah. What's fascinating about it too is, again, you segued perfectly into that. A harmless, seemingly harmless little 11-year-old, and yet she's very powerful. She's one of the most powerful characters in the story, if not the, as far as we know. How does she feel about her powers?
She doesn't understand them. I mean, she's fairly new to them, really. All she knows is that she's had less than a half a dozen instances where she has been able to lay her hands on either an animal or a human and make them better. We see her first real instance where she goes on the defensive in issue number 2, where she's scared and angry at the same time, and she's holding on to Mr. E. And we later see that he's raised boils all over his hands. And I don't know we don't know if she has realized that she's done that. but this is going to be a whole nother issue for her, is walking. And again, she's 11. She was walking this tightrope about what's right and what's wrong. She could go either way at this point. An 11-year-old is impressionable. She could get snotty and angry and say, if you don't do what I want you to do, I can hurt you. Or she can realize that, as Peter Parker says, with great powers comes great responsibility. And this is going to be the part where Olivia and Zach come in. Olivia's internal conflict is, what the hell has she gotten herself into? She has left her job, which was no big hardship for her. She hated it. She was reduced to being a construction crew worker, and was definitely being harassed and being reduced to the role of token female, where she knows she's a badass Marine. So this is a much better fit for her lifestyle. But on the other hand, she's got to also run the minefield of taking care of a child. She has no experience on that, but at least she's got a lot more common sense than Zach. So she's going to find herself in the role of providing advice to a little girl and trying to steer this little girl in the right direction. And we couldn't ask for better than a Marine, female Marine, to explain and guide a young girl through the difficulties of life, and on how to stand up for herself and how to be a woman of strength and character. So
now, are they afraid of her at all? Zach and Olivia?
Zach is a little bit afraid of her.
Okay.
So far, Olivia isn't, but
okay,
that's a possibility when she sees exactly what this can do. We're going to see some more in issues 3 and 4 of what exactly divinity can do. But again, when does fear and love clash, and what wins?
Yes. And also, again, you've got the responsibility and accountability balance going with divinity herself, and that's a huge weight for an 11-year-old to carry and to decipher. So you've got that going on.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about that puts me in mind of reading accounts of people who have, like the parents of serial killers. Mm-hmm. They still love their children.
Oh yeah.
And they know that these people have done terrible, terrible things, and they're actually afraid of them, afraid of their own children. A lot of people are afraid of their own children.
Are we going to meet Divinity's parents? They're gone? Are we?
They're just in flash. Oh, they're dead.
Okay.
That's how Zach got a hardship discharge from the Marines to take care of
but
him.
are we going to meet him in flashbacks? Yeah.
And it was explained early on that they told her not to tell anybody about what she could do, to keep it a secret, because they were fearful for her, not of her, but for her. And obviously it got out anyway, and it cost them their lives. What Zach is actually kind of thinks she's a freak, because in the first issue he goes, "What are you?"
Mm-hmm.
But still he learns to love her, and a love is a much more powerful emotion than fear or hate.
Yes,
in my opinion.
I agree, and I think it's really intriguing, and it's also compelling to see that overcome these forces that are all around her. The struggle of the enforced parenthood of Zach and Olivia, and then the deadly forces that are trying to capture and misuse her power. You've set up this really cool dynamic that's going on. So,
are there going to be any religious sort of connotations to her power? It seems kind of obvious that somebody who'd heal would be seen as the second coming.
Well, and see, that's another whole plot line. there's a reason that I named her Divinity, is that it's never going to be revealed exactly where her powers came from. I'm going to leave that open to interpretation so that anybody can put their own spin on it.
Mhm.
But we know it comes from a higher power, whether that
Okay.
be your God, my God, somebody else's God is responsible. I'm never going to answer that question
Mhm.
because I want this to be everybody's interpretation of where her divine powers come from.
I think that's wise, Barb, because when you explain things too much, a la Highlander 2,
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't quite keep it mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it, midi chlorians to explain the Force. Keep it mysterious. It's that allows more participation, in my opinion, for the viewer and the reader.
Everybody gets the midichlorian thing wrong. Everybody, I always, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I always get that because I remember a lot of people keep saying the midichlorians create the Force. That's
No,
never what they said in the movie.
no,
All they
it's
said
not.
was that it allows them to communicate
Yes,
with the Force. And I
yes.
see, and I'm not saying you, but I've seen so many people like the midichlorians made the Force. I'm like, you're not listening
No,
to what he said. It said it just allows them to communicate with the Force. The Force is still the Force. They're the things that let you talk to them. And that to me, when I heard that, I'm like, okay, that didn't
yeah,
bother me too much.
it adds a little more of a science fiction element to an
Yeah,
otherwise mystical power, and that's a taste thing. And I,
it
I, I
is.
was cool with that. It's kind of like saying, if you're O positive blood type, you can wield this extrasensory perception a little
Or
better than people
something
who
like
aren't.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So, again, adding a technical aspect to a mystical power, which is cool. I mean, it's just, again, it's a taste thing. Like a lot of people like the fact that in the Blade continuity, silver works against vampires and
Right.
sunlight
It's
works
a
against vampires, not for sacred reasons, but for scientific reasons, right? And that's just another
It's a
take.
chemical
The
reaction.
purity of the chemical. Did you
Right.
ever think that, now maybe I'm wrong, did you ever think strangely enough that silver was always used against evil because silver is the whitest and bluest of the metals, and usually white and blue is considered a color of divinity and
I
goodness?
hadn't,
I don't
no.
know if there's anything to that, but I've always been curious because it could it just also just be the color of the metal that's part of it. I don't know.
I don't know about the color. I do have my own explanation, which,
Yeah.
again, perfect segue for my book. I'm in the process of writing my series called Silver Blade, and it takes place in the Victorian England in 1892, and we are in the time period where you have characters like Alan Quatermain and Abraham Van Helsing and Dracula, although Dracula doesn't make an appearance, certainly not in the first series. But what I'm going to do with this story is bring different personalities together from literature, but with characters I've created, and I'm going to address two things primarily while we're having fun with the action adventure and the sword play and the fighting and the shootouts and all that. Um, I'm going to address, number one, why silver works against evil, why it always has. And it's an explanation that I don't think has ever been used. So I'm not going to give that away till the book comes out. Even the 6-page Christmas special that'll come out before the series is not going to reveal that. So that will come, but it won't be anytime soon. The second issue I want to take on is basically the bigger question. So I'm using more of a foundational philosophical platform, like we were talking earlier, Aaron, and that is um, why in this particular story, it's Christian based. So in that perspective, we have an order of holy knights versus an evil order that worship the golden calf. Okay, so why in this environment, why does God let bad things happen to good people? And I, I have my own personal opinion about why that happens, and part of it's scriptural, part of it is just the way I have worked it out in my own head. And just to summarize it without getting too deep into it, um, it's to do multiple things. First of all, in the broad sense, it's the result of free will. We're not
That's
robots, right?
right. Free
We
will.
can do what we want, and the price of free will means that some people are going to choose the darkness over the light, and bad things will come of that. The way I believe that redemption is always available and a salvation is always available, not just for the good people, but even for the people who choose evil. They have the opportunity up until the very end to repent and redeem themselves. So I'm going to work that in as well. But basically, the price of free will is that there's evil in the world, there's darkness in the world, but there's also beauty in the world. And in my particular perspective in Silverblade, um, there's more beauty in the world than evil, even though sometimes it seems that evil holds sway, and that it's only an illusion that there's more darkness than light. And if we choose light, we become more connected to the light. So therefore, we tend to see light more than
Right.
darkness. So I'm going to play along those lines. But here's an aspect I don't think's been done either, and that is that I use the Force in Star Wars as a metaphor for this, okay? But
Right.
in my storyline, it's grace versus hate, right? So the power of the
Okay.
darkness is driven by hate, the power of the light is driven by grace. Well, grace is something where you have the virtue of forgiveness and patience and all these virtues, love, obviously, and then the different aspects of love. um, these are difficult to explain if you don't use the broad, iconic character types that I'm using. So that brings me to how the characters work in their internal and external conflict. We have our main character, Elizabeth Dane, who is a very intelligent and high spirited, as they would call her in Victorian times, woman who does not know her proper place, in those days.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And she's the daughter of a very wealthy globe-trotting adventurer who was best friends with Alan Quartermain, and he ran off and left her to sort of raise herself with nannies and so forth. And she wanted so much to be like him and admired him and loved him. And when he never came home from an adventure, she has this sort of love-hate relationship for the whole adventurer world, and she really doesn't like Alan Quartermain very much. She really doesn't Shirley blames him for dragging her dad off across the world to chase after relics and adventure and so on. But at the same time, she wants to be like that. So she makes her living tutoring wealthy children, but it also gives her an excuse to travel and to study. And she loves archaeology. She's the one who inadvertently discovers the silver blade, which is a Templar sword from the Middle Ages. And once she starts to study it, she realizes it has some sort of power that she's not encountered before. Her life also gets in danger because she starts being hunted and her house gets broken into. She's threatened. So reluctantly, she decides, okay, I've got to find out more about this. And my dad's best friend, Alan Quartermain, as much as I loathe him, he may be helpful with some information. So she goes to Quartermain and the Order of Sacred Silver um, that Quartermain is a member of to find out what in the world is all about this sword and why is it so important to this underworld. Why do they want it so bad other than its monetary value? And why does it affect her like it does? Because it casts a sort of grace light on her in a way where she feels comforted and yet at the same time like she should do good things with it. And my two driving mottos for the Order of Sacred Silver is defend innocence, destroy evil, right? So, the typical sort
Yeah.
of sacred knight credo. So anyway, that's her. Her internal conflict really is, I don't really want to join this secret brandy and cigars club that my daddy was a member of that got him probably killed. He never came home. And these guys are just a bunch of pompous jerks, really. But at the same time, I'm fascinated by what they're fascinated by, and
Right.
I'll show them that I can be better than they are because I can be smarter than they are about what they do, and not be bumbling and not be misogynist and not be greedy and not be dumb, basically.
Anything
And
you can do,
she's
I can
a
do
brilliant
better.
character. She's a brilliant character, and really, she's smarter than most of the other characters. Her hubris is, in a way, her flaw, and also she's very much resistant to forgiveness. She's very angry,
Uh,
and that's her flaw. She can't forgive her dad. She can't forgive um,
Quartermain.
Quartermain.
Now,
So
does the
then,
sword affect other people the same as it affects her, or does it just affect her that way?
it depends on not midi-chlorians. It depends on it depends on your ability to receive and channel grace, right? How
Okay.
open you are to that. She is very open to that naturally because she's a virtuous person by nature. She's the type that rescues the hurt dog when the mean old man's beating the dog. She's the type that goes into the most dangerous neighborhoods in London on Christmas Eve and gives food to the poor, regardless of the danger to her and so on. And that's how we're introduced to her. And my Christmas special is she's taking food to a single woman who is broke and living in the worst part of Whitechapel during the
Oh,
time
okay.
of,
Jack the
like Jack
Ripper?
the Ripper, stuff like that. So anyway, okay, so then that brings us to let's talk about Sam. Sam Blake. He is an adventurer. He's a former U.S. cavalry officer. He served when he was much younger in the Civil War. Um, and he's not proud of a lot of the things he did as a U.S. cavalry officer in the late 19th century. But he is after whoever murdered his wife and kidnapped his daughter, and he has tracked them to England. And we're introduced to him in a fencing contest with a pompous English fencing champion. And we see very quickly that he's charming and he's an excellent swordsman, and he is just predominantly an all-American guy. He's
Right.
dashing and kind of brash, and he knows he's good, and but
Like you,
he's
right,
not
Dean?
perfect. No, no, I'm not Sam Blake. We won't go there. But there's
Self insert.
one interesting thing I wanted to add to Sam's character is that um, he was trained by Zorro, and
Oh, that's
we're,
kind of cool.
and we're going to see some flashbacks in the series. Something that Zorro, Don Diego de la Vega, actually taught Sam was that Sam loses his temper when he fences. He's an excellent swordsman, but when he gets cornered, he gets frustrated and gets breathless about it, gets angry, loses his temper. And Zorro has to chide him and remember and let him say, look, if you lose your temper, you lose. You have to get your anger under control. And that helps Sam later in the series understand how to channel grace, but also to understand how to win without hate and anger consuming him, right? So there's a little bit of the echo and tribute to Luke in episode 6, right? With,
Yeah.
the vengeance versus mercy, that kind of thing. Sam may or may not make that same choice, but the point being that we're going to come to understand that Sam is driven mostly by vengeance. He doesn't really believe in God or any sort of divine power because he's seen too much death and too much injustice done in the name of religion and what's right. So he's in the stage of sort of pure materialism.
He's
And
agnostic.
yes, and through his contact with Quartermain and the Order of Sacred Silver, he will come to understand that there's something out there larger than he is, and the barrier between him and the ability to channel this divine power is his own uh, love of vengeance. Right now, he's consumed by vengeance, and um, he's gonna learn that lesson. So there's his internal conflict. His external conflict is, of course, the Golden Calf Society. Now, the Golden Calf Society is my version of the Hellfire Club, which was, historical and also way overused in the Marvel
Yeah.
universe. So I didn't want to do the same thing that Marvel did. But the Golden Calf Society are these wicked, wealthy, corrupt politicians and leaders in Victorian England who take advantage of children and of the poor and basically use them as sexual toys and exploit them and then cast them aside. And
Mm.
so the villains, again, are a common theme today, unfortunately, is the human trafficking problem, and which, it's basically modern slavery. And so I want to sort of touch on that in the Victorian era, that you had the extremely wealthy and extremely poor, and the order runs an orphanage where they address that and use their wealth to help orphans, but also to fight this underworld evil secret society. So that's, it's got a little mix of everything in there, but that's basically it. So it's, they're not really superheroes. They're more like knights channeling divine power when they can. But again, you'll find out about Silver. You'll find out about the golden calf. You'll also find out that not only angels have swords, right? So when Lucifer fell, he also had a sword. So
Oh.
that's going to also come into play in the storyline. So we're going to bring in, a lot of different mythological and scriptural references and sort of blend it all together. But you're going to have fun meeting some literary characters you're familiar with, not just Alan Quatermain, but Abraham Van Helsing and the laboratory of Dr. Frankenstein. Now, Victor's no longer around because this is way after his time, but the bad guys do spend some time experimenting in the remnants of Victor's lab. So you're gonna see a little bit of that, and you're also going to see some of Victor's failed experiments make their appearance in the story as well. So just
When
Oh,
you
that's kind of
say
cool.
when you say the golden calf, all I can see is the scene in the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston looking down on the. They're all dancing around this golden calf.
Yep. That's pretty much. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually the artistic reference I used to draw
Oh
with that. If you look at the picture that's up now on the stream, and you look at the bottom part of the drawing, that is the golden calf heavily inspired by
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that
the
makes sense.
sculpture from the Ten Commandments, right? Because I figured, hey, it's pop culture references.
that's
Why
right.
not?
That's
Go for
right.
it. So you may or may not actually see that golden calf in the series as well. So just a lot of fun things that. Now, my influences for the story are a mix. There are things that you could probably guess, things like Star Wars and that sort of thing, but also um, uh, the Wild Wild West. I don't know if you guys are old enough to
Yeah.
remember the Wild
Oh,
Wild
yeah,
Oh
West.
yeah.
God, yes! I swear to God, you could bounce a quarter off of Robert Conrad's ass.
There you go. See, well, I grew up with Robert
Just a quarter,
Conrad.
no pennies or anything,
No,
no
nothing,
dimes.
just a quarter. He said. He
She's
said
throwing
just a
like
quarter.
a roll of the quarters out his butt.
But yeah, so as a kid, basically just admiring those two guys, Jim and Artie and their adventures in a sort of, that was steampunk before there was steampunk,
Yep.
and it
Yeah.
was fun. We have a guest. I would be remiss in not
Hey there.
welcoming Roberta Conroy. Robbie, how are you? Please introduce
Hi.
yourself to everyone. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
good
joining
morning
us.
or good afternoon or whatever it is today. Yes, I'm Roby Conroy. I am just hopping on to say hi, and it's been a while since you've had your group together. I miss you, Barb. Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Yeah.
Yep, I've had a lot going on in my life this last year, but things are starting to slow down. So you'll be seeing more of me.
Great.
It's good to
I'm
see
glad
you.
to
What are
hear
you
it.
working on for Silverline, Robbie? Catch everybody up on what you're working
So
on.
I'm hopping back onto Cat and Mouse.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
good. Good to you
That's
like
great.
this. This is
That's
coming up.
That's really,
whoa.
oh yeah. I can,
That's a
there you
two-page.
go. Oh my God, I love it.
That's
Awesome.
a
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
two-page
Wow,
spread.
that's amazing.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
two-page spread.
And tell everybody you're the colorist, correct?
Yeah. So I am coloring that issue that she's working on right now.
Fantastic.
And I think there are 2 books in the works at the moment.
Yeah, there is.
There's
Well, now,
still,
I would be
She
remiss
has
if
like
I.
the best box of crayons too. I've seen Roby's
Oh yeah.
crayons. They're awesome.
So,
Mhm.
what do you what do you like to use as far as technology? And then tell us some of your inspirations, because we want to talk about that. I'm sure people want to know.
I'm always trying to think about my inspirations, and the biggest influence I think I always point out to was when I was really young, and I had an awful lot of art influenced by my sci-fi books from 60s and
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
mainly 60s book covers. So I
Oh
think that started me in kind of a certain style, just really, and it's a color palette. It's I just liked fantasy art,
oh
and so
yeah.
that was my beginning.
I'm with you there. I grew up wanting to paint like Frazetta and
Yeah.
all the fantasy artists from that era. But also, do you remember how wonderful movie posters were in those days?
Yes,
And how
yes,
beautifully illustrated the movie poster was, and how you got the feel of the movie and a tease for the content without it giving everything away.
Yes.
whenever I see a movie poster that isn't like a photo compilation, they actually took the time to hire an artist. I always think there's something better about that movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I always use the Harry Potter series as a timeline for the demise of the illustrated poster, because that Harry Potter and the
Hmm.
Sorcerer's Stone #1 is painted. And then by the time we get to 2 and 3, we're using Photoshop. And I'm like, come on, guys. But I actually
Yeah,
saw Drew Struzan's painting. I have his book. And Drew Struzan, who did the first one, the painting for Chamber of Secrets is beautiful. I wish they'd gone with that. It's
oh
absolutely
wow,
gorgeous. And I wish they still did that. Now, another one of my heroes as a boy, shocker, was James Bond. So those posters were beautiful
that's
too.
really, yeah, understandably. That
Just
stuff is really interesting.
really interesting how they would the movie collage style of illustration still influences me. So when I do a cover, I've had people tell me, reminds me of the 70s and 80s movie posters. I'm like, well, yeah, so
And
definitely an inspiration there.
but
Definitely.
there was a lot of thought that went into that. And I
Absolutely.
think it's a different kind of a response they're looking for now.
I think so too. I absolutely love people like Bob Peak. You guys remember the poster for Star Trek: The Motion Picture,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I think he even
Mm.
did Wrath of Khan too. But
Oh yeah.
he could just make 3 faces of the major characters, and you wanted to see the movie just because of his illustration. But then you realize, wait, this is just 3 faces I'm looking at and a spaceship behind them, and he made it compelling. And part of that, obviously composition, color choice,
Hmm.
talent and skill of capturing the character and the nature of the characters, and likeness, the ability to capture likeness.
I'm in awe of that skill. It's pretty
It's
amazing.
amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it
It
is.
really, really is. But
You were talking about book covers, and this wasn't in the '60s, but more the '70s and '80s. But you remember Michael Whalen?
of course,
Hmm.
yeah.
Of
Yeah,
course,
I've
yeah,
always
absolutely.
loved. I love
I
his.
love him so much.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
I have a couple of his posters
I.
from book covers in my studio here.
Hmm.
No, I think that the ability to summarize and create an iconic image for a 2 or 3 hour film in an illustration is a singular talent. And my hats off to people can pull that off and pull that off well. And I'm on your team in terms of bring that back. Please bring it back. You can do, go ahead and do the photo collage and Photoshop of the actors and whatever. That's fine. But then also hire an artist, and I'll buy the poster. I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dune, for instance. Have you guys seen some of the
God, yeah.
promotional stuff for Dune and how
yes.
awesome
It looks so
It
good.
looks awesome.
Yeah, I want to do a whole little pop culture segment in the future on Dune.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too off track. I want to stay on what we're talking about. So,
What were we talking about?
well,
Yeah,
really, what
you
were we
were
talking
talking
about? Cool 60s
influences.
and 70s stuff. No, we're talking
Yeah.
about internal and external conflict.
Also 80s stuff when the movie Alien came out.
Oh,
I had a big Geiger push, and that really did a lot.
Yeah.
oh, was that not
Just
cool?
amazing.
Literally that poster, I remember I was in the theater and it was just this egg with a green light burning out of the broken crack on the egg.
You
And
wanted
then
to
the
see that
tag
movie.
was, Alien in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah,
I was
that was
like,
that was
That
perfect.
tells you everything.
Brilliant.
that tells you everything. And I was just like, this is such a perfect, and of course it redefined, sci-fi horror, certainly, but even the way people view horror, it also made me a lifelong Ridley Scott fan and
For
forever
sure.
influenced my aesthetic and my art. Everyone who has to ink me or color me just goes, ugh, because all I put rain, ashes, flames, snow,
Mhm.
sleet,
Yes, he does.
dust.
Oh yeah.
Ask all these people who've worked over my, they're like, oh my God, Dean's can do more raindrops. Stop it. Stop with the ash. Stop with the rain. Stop, But I got that from Ridley Scott, and very much so from Alien, and to a lesser extent Blade Runner, but both,
Mhm.
But back to the conflict and character creation. When you guys set out to create a character, do you intentionally say, okay, I want this character to have this conflict or whatever, or does it organically develop as the character develops? Aaron, you go first. Like, did you set out ahead of time to fulfill, okay, this is going to be my conflicted character, this is going to be or did it just come to
Going
life
down.
as you were creating?
Everything's.
Are you there? I'm sorry.
What
I think you hiccuped a little bit. Say that again, Aaron.
Aaron.
I think we have a little
Maybe internet hiccup.
internet hiccup right
Yeah,
there.
I had one earlier.
Yeah. What about you, Barb? How about you when you take on a character?
Mine came about organically. I had the general concept, storyline, and the plot and everything like that. But I like to be as realistic as possible. I'm just super logical like that. And if you're gonna write a character, you're gonna have motivations and how would he act. You have to get into their heads, and so along with that comes their issues, because you have to know why they're going to act the way they act and why they say the things they're going to say. So for me, it comes organically. I don't set out ahead of time to say, I want this guy to have this conflict.
Right.
You
right.
know, I know who he is, and as I develop the character, then his conflicts come naturally.
Okay, now I'm back.
Welcome back, Aaron.
Yeah, apparently all I had to do was just refresh it, I guess.
Yeah. So
I really think Dean's doing this. I think
Yeah. No.
the word
Dean's just kicking me out.
All right, enough.
He's
from
like,
Aaron.
and we're done looking at his face for the night. Click. Click.
Well, okay, so you can go ahead and share with us, like, is it organic for you, or is it something I've got to have this type of character, this archetype, and this archetype?
You mean you click off boxes?
Or do you, Aaron, when you were creating the Godlings, for example? Can you hear me, guys, or I'm not sure.
Aaron, are you there now?
I think he was there.
I think he lost it again.
Yeah, I think we lost it again.
I'm going
to.
Yeah, you weren't done with your description though, Barb.
Yeah, you guys keep freezing on me.
All right.
What's wrong with this? Hold on a second.
I was just going to finish up with saying that the worst thing that you can accomplish is coming up with a one-dimensional character,
What is wrong with this?
Absolutely right.
Sure.
because there are no one-dimensional people. Even the villains are not one-dimensional.
Correct.
Everybody
Correct.
has got um, a reason for the things that they do, and they have their own fears and their own ambitions. So even the bad guys can't be, I'm going to take over the world. Why? Well, because I want to take over the world. But why do you want to take over the world? Because I want to take over the world. You know?
Right. 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 It's fascinating too that the most interesting villains are usually the ones where, in some level, you sympathize with their motivation in a little bit of a way. You know, you sort of get it. You're like, okay, you went over the edge with this. You're hurting people. You're being cruel. But you know, I get what your position is, but you got to stop. And those villains are the ones that are usually the most compelling and fun to watch. There he is again. Is he back for good? Can you hear us? Ground control to Major Humphreys.
In all the villains' minds, what they're doing makes total sense to them.
Yes, yes. And the decision whether people getting hurt
Yeah.
is collateral
It
damage
keeps
or
once I get into the room, everything starts, you're all slowing down again.
oh boy.
Yeah, it immediately starts slowing down. So I'm
Hey,
trying to ask
are you on
You
Chrome?
try
Carlos
quitting some things?
what's going on.
Are you on Chrome? Well, we'll give Aaron a chance to reset. We're coming up on the end of the first hour, so what I want to do is I want to thank our sponsors again. Daytona Beach Comic Convention coming up on September 18th and 19th, and I'd also like to again thank our producer Carlos for helping to bring up these images as we talk about them and discuss them. If we get Aaron back and he's stable.
Okay, I think I'm.
Just stable. Aaron has never been
Yeah.
stable.
He's never been
No,
stable in
never.
one way, but
Can you
in
hear me
another
now?
way, or I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Take a stab at the question about creating characters. Do you calculate them, or do they come to life as you're creating them?
They kind of come to life. That's a good one. They're kind of calculated. I know I'm very plot driven when I
Okay.
write my stories, so my characters are very much servicing a plot. And then the characters I think kind of grow a little bit. The main character, Boomer, is based off me, so that's an easy. It's literally
Self-insert.
yeah, yeah, it is. But it's the other ones are they kind of grow. I think over time I've dealt with these. I know them enough that I know what they would do.
Right.
I think it's a little bit of both. But yeah, I'm very plot driven. So characters are used to service a message or an idea I'm trying to get across, not too character driven in my story.
Okay. Okay. What about there's something called deadlock. Can you tell us about
there.
deadlock? Are you there?
Aaron?
Mm.
Get Brent's opinion quick before he dies.
Yeah,
All right. Are you back?
yeah,
You
I'm
with
still
us
here.
now?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
I think we're
Yeah,
slowing
can you hear
down.
me now? Okay.
I can hear you. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Deadlock was a story that it's a book I'm thinking about coming. Am I slowing down?
Yes.
No.
Okay. And the Deadlock was a book that I used to write like a kid's book that was basically like an adult story. So I wanted to mix genres.
Okay.
So the book reads like a kid's book, but it's about a cowboy that loses his soul in a poker game and has to go get it back. He's basically the Al Bundy of the Old West. That's how I vision him, because Al Bundy's my hero. So he's just kind of a guy that basically has like the worst luck happen to him at all. I have another story that I'm writing him that I like to come back to, where he ends up going to like basically a whorehouse in the
Okay.
Old West, and they all turn out to be werewolves. I mean, he's just like, that's why it's called dead luck. Like he just has like naturally bad luck, and all this
Oh wow.
stuff happens to him. But he's just like the most I don't care, smokes, drinks, he's just a typical dude. He's just your Al Bundy and all this stuff. So he's a straight man. I play a lot of stuff off him as a straight man
I
sort
see.
of character.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So he's Tilly Day. He's just like the comedic version of this whole thing, to me at least.
Right.
And his character, he was a Civil War veteran. That's why he wears that coat. That was a sort of
Oh,
Civil War coat, I think.
nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Civil War reference in your stuff too. Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
we have a guest that's arrived here, a late arrival. We're always happy to have him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brent Larson. Brent Larson. Brent, introduce yourself to the crowd here and talk to us a little bit about what you're working on for Silverline. everybody, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm even
Yeah.
a guest host here, Brent. I just, I do what the powers that be ask me to do. And can you guest? Sure. So, yeah,
Yeah.
all guests here. All
I
guests.
think I've been on every stream this week. And I'm lucky because we could have all been talking about the same subject, and by tonight it would have been like, I have no more to say about it. But it's been different subjects every night, so there you go.
Yeah, it's been really fun. It's been fun. So, Brent, tell everybody what you do for Silverline and what you're currently working on.
which I'm really looking forward to sharing. And actually, I just got Lewis going on issue uh, number 1 of the new Kalis arc,
Nice,
which is exciting. And yeah, we got this thing planned out for quite a while, so
awesome.
it's gonna be pretty cool. Yeah. Mm.
Well, you've joined us at the moment in the show when we're going to start talking about our pop culture material. So, tonight, to sort of dovetail with what we were talking about internal and external conflict in creating characters, I wanted to touch base on Black Widow and also on the Loki TV series. So, I don't know if Brent, did you get a chance to see either one of those?
I saw both.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Uh, Robbie, what about you? Did you get to see either
I
Black
saw
Widow?
Loki,
Okay,
and I still have yet to see Black Widow.
okay. We'll make sure this discussion will remain spoiler free. We'll be talking
I
more.
don't mind if you spoil it. It's
Okay,
not going to kill
okay,
me.
okay.
I have
Well,
enough opinionated friends and what have you,
oh,
so it's
great.
fine.
Well, we'll start. What we'll do for fun then is we'll start with Loki, the TV series about the god of mischief in the Asgardian pantheon, and I thought this was pretty brilliant in terms of a deconstruction, reconstruction of Loki's psyche in terms of taking away his powers and sitting him down and really putting him under the microscope, especially in the first episode, and having him explain to us, what do you want? Why do you do what you do? Do you enjoy hurting people and watching them suffer, and why? And Loki's responses to all this, from outrage to how dare you, treat me this way, I'm a god, to finally just breaking down and talking about those issues. For let's start with you, Robbie. You've seen the show. What did you think of that
Yeah,
first episode and how Loki was treated and how he responded?
well, I wasn't expecting that treatment of him. I guess it really did feel like it just put a spotlight on him and his thoughts in a way I've never handled uh, contemplating. So for me, I thought it was more of a character study than I expected.
I
It was
agree.
slower in that way too, you know.
Yeah, Yeah, it really was. It was a shock to see a character typically portrayed as, in control and outsmarting everyone in the room, to sort of just completely trapped. And what he does in that situation, and the
Well,
writing is nice, is
the
brilliant.
world building there was really unique, though. I think that's what helped me enjoy it a lot more, is
Yes,
trying to imagine what is this place. They just, you know,
yes.
took
We're
they
talking about
took
the
so much, yeah, they took so much of his power away from him, and it just was a really interesting direction.
I thought so too. For those who may have not seen it, Loki is captured by the Time Variance Authority, the TVA, and these people are basically, it's a bureaucracy that controls the sacred time stream and apprehends offenders they call variants, who take action to break the sacred time stream and cause branches to branch off and ultimately bring chaos and the destruction of reality by clashing timelines or something similar to that. It's pretty heady stuff, but it's fun to watch Loki struggle as he's captured. And they really, I mean, if you guys, I'd love to hear your take on this. I'm going to just throw it out there and let everybody have a take. They actually have Owen Wilson plays an agent called Mobius, and he and Loki have face-to-face conversations that I haven't really seen done in the MCU, where they are actually addressing philosophical questions such as the nature of free will versus predestination. And the idea in the Marvel U setup in this storyline is that there are um, three godlike beings who are the timekeepers, and everything has to go according to their decision of what is appropriate for the time stream. Otherwise, you're canceled, you're destroyed, or you're realigned to the proper time stream. And so Loki is arguing free will, and Owen Wilson's character is arguing the opposite. And it's kind of interesting. Brent, I'd love to get your take on this. I'm just going to throw it out to you. I know you're into this heady stuff, so go for it.
Just that question, huh? Okay.
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about with the Loki series.
There's a
Um,
lot
That was
more
good.
I think. Uh, okay. This is my non-cerebral answer, which is to say I haven't chewed on it very hard.
Okay. All right.
The show very deftly poses the question and then doesn't bother to answer.
Right.
In fact, I can hear myself talking. I'm talking to myself, literally.
I can hear
I
you.
know, man.
Wow.
I see your point. No. But anyway,
Robbie, try to mute your.
Is it me?
I don't know.
Shouldn't be. Well, maybe my speaker is too slow.
No, it's probably because I brought our stream up on YouTube because I can't hear.
Oh,
Brandon
that would
see
do
it.
it.
I can't see or
that
hear
would
him,
do
so
it.
everything he's saying is completely muted. So,
oh, now when I talk now, I
so
only hear me once. Okay, it's
Awesome.
like it's the voices in my head. Only this time there's just one. Okay. To tell you the truth, I work with a filmmaking group that does a lot of nonprofit kind of videos, films with messages. And one thing we learned from the beginning was anytime we noticed a movie of any kind, 2 hours, 2 minutes, that really tries to answer a question, it fails miserably because the audience is thinking, you're just trying to tell me what you think and or push it on me. So the nice thing about the show is they have Loki with the free will. We have Owen Wilson, the Mobius character, going, no, it's all scripted. And the answer is maybe both and or let's do some adventuring. And they kind of let the audience just kind of mull over it themselves. And then in the last episode, especially when things start to fracture, you're never actually still feeling like they ever came down on one side or the other. They are like, you know what, you guys, this is a question that's stumped humanity for ever since there's been a humanity. How are the world ever going to answer it in an episode of a Disney Plus show? Answer. Let's not try. So I appreciated that about them. So
I agree. It's best when tackling heady questions. Uh, Maybe perhaps you can suggest possible explanations and then let the viewer decide for themselves. That makes
yeah.
for a much more engaging interaction. Aaron, have you seen it?
Loki? No,
Yes,
no,
you
I have
haven't
not.
seen Loki. Barb, have you seen Loki?
I've seen Black Widow, and I've seen 2 episodes of Loki. And as you said, you're given an insight into him. However, I have to say that they've been setting Loki up as the perfect trope of an anti-hero in every single movie that he has appeared in, going back to the original Avengers movie, because I mean he did such a lousy job of trying to take over the world. I mean, think about it. He managed to screw everything up, leaving a back door into the machine on top of the Stark building. He opened up a tiny little hole for all of his forces to come through. He was actually being controlled by Thanos, but he managed to work around the edges of that control to completely sabotage all of his own plans. So you could see right then he became very sympathetic, especially after the Hulk had beat him into a rag doll. And he's laying there and he says, I'd like to take that drink now. And then in every successive movie, you see all of these very human qualities, these little boy qualities to him when he's trying to be evil. So Marvel themselves has set him up to be a sympathetic anti-hero. So when the beginning of Loki starts, you see his normal braggadocio and arrogance and stuff like that, but you can also see he's scared. And then when he sees what happens to Asgard in that episode, the first episode,
Yes.
um, you see that really all along he's always been insecure and fearful. So in that respect, I wasn't all that surprised when he broke down and started discussing his innermost thoughts to Mobius, because Mobius seems to be pretty intuitive, you know.
I thought so as well. Now, when you see a character that we're all pretty familiar with, written that way, how does that inform you as you're creating your villains? Because what I try to do is I'm not a professional writer really. I mean, I'm learning to write, so I'm trying to give everybody that three-dimensional, realistic foundation. So when you see that in Loki, did that inform you, or do you see that and go, "I want my villains to have that sort of humanity and vulnerability as well," or did that affect you at all?
Way too late. I already had my my book written and stuff like that by the
Right,
time that came along.
right.
But like I stated, I think he's the antithesis of most villains because he's coming into it back asswards.
Mm-hmm.
He started out as a loving son and always being picked on and bullied and made fun of for his skills, and then backed into villainism. And we saw that as we progressed right through the MCU movies. So I don't think it came as a shock to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't like, oh yeah, I have to make my villain look like Loki. I'm like, oh, that was no so not a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I'd already
Mm-hmm.
figured that out 5 movies ago.
Would you say his doorway into villainy is envy? Is it
Yes.
envy? Okay.
Yes. Envy and insecurity. He has to
Mm-hmm.
feel like he's somebody because uh he's been put down so often from Thor's buddies and being told that he's second best to Thor all of his life. And I think a lot of it is resentment and to prove himself. I'm going to prove that I'm just as good as everybody, everybody else. So it's envy and resentment
Hmm.
that has made
So
him a villain.
yeah, I think that works as a motivation for him, and it would work as a motivation for any villain. Those of us who are writing. What about you, Aaron? Do you have villains that are driven by those forces? Envy, insecurity,
Um,
or
my
are they
villain
more?
in my villains in my story, I don't technically write villains per se because if you technically, especially if you look at Godlings, my
Mhm.
main character is the villain.
Okay, okay,
He so reverse he ends up that there's a villain at the end that comes back to get revenge on my character because of something he did.
okay.
And
Fair enough.
he's totally justified to do that. So so it's kind of one of those things where um I technically like a lot of shows where there's like good, bad, like a villain and a hero. They'll sometimes kind of bore me. They're not very engaging to me personally. I don't mind them. But I like something like I was really a big fan of the Matrix trilogy because
Mhm.
they weren't like technically villains that are trying to break this sort of pattern. And so it's much more interesting. The movie Akira is
Yeah,
very interesting, where the main
Mhm.
protagonist is the villain basically. I like shows that kind of study or do character studies on what people would happen if they got this power, or did that and that.
sure.
That's why I like the Zack Snyder when he did Superman. Because it's like, what if you were a god? I mean, how would the world treat you realistically? I thought that was much more fascinating than he's just like this Boy Scout, which I'm like, so this is why I like a lot of the stuff around Star Wars, but like the Star Wars storytelling doesn't really do much for me.
Right,
Because it's like there's evil and there's good, and it's really hard for me to sit there and go like, well, I've never met anyone who's just evil because I'm evil.
Right.
I'm
right,
just evil. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And no one is completely altruistically good.
right.
So I think it's just more like like the conflict or like conflict of interest. I think is more
Hmm.
invigorating than this person who's like, I must be evil 24 hours a day in everything I do. Like he's just like he's going out kicking puppies and pushing kids down because he's just evil, and it's just like, okay, it doesn't do anything for me. I know a lot of people really like this. This is sometimes why a lot of the American style movies, blockbusters, kind of. I mean, they're cool spectacles, but there's not much really to grab onto except
They're one dimensional.
the very one dimensional.
Yeah,
It's the same story told again and again
Yeah.
and again, and you can
sure,
see it coming 1,000 miles away. So it gets personally boring to me. So
sure.
I don't write that into my stories. But I know a lot of people really like that because it's like comfort food. I
Yeah, I
guess
mean,
everyone's
there's a lot of different motivations for somebody to be evil. They're not evil in
right.
their own minds. There's
Yeah.
pride, there's hurt, there's greed, there's fear, and there's love. All of that stuff can make people
Right.
evil. Do
Hmm.
evil things for any of those reasons,
Yeah,
and
I think strangely enough, like somebody.
ideology is another one.
Hmm.
Right. And so like if there's a good reason why somebody, but usually I like if there's a villain, I try to write them as they're not evil in their own head, they're just conflict of interest. You
Right.
could argue that Conan and Judge Dredd, which are two of my favorite characters, are evil
Yeah,
because of what
one
they
could
do.
make that argument. Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
and that to me is much more interesting than somebody who's like, I do all good all the time. This is
Right.
why it's when every time people break characters, because I don't think one person's one side or the other, and if they are, it's kind of boring
I
to
Well,
agree.
me
I think
personally. So it
I
just
think
doesn't do
I think
anything for me.
too that what you've touched on and why it's boring is lazy writing because
Yeah.
what I always say is, Superman can be a fascinating
You
character
can if you write them right.
if you
Yeah.
write him correctly.
I
Totally.
find him
He
boring.
can still, and so, same thing with Captain America. They can
Yeah.
be the Boy Scout who wants to do good all the time, but if you write them correctly, they're conflicted too because they have the human struggle inside, just like everyone does, and you can write that. You just have to be a good writer. And
Yeah. Well, Cap
worked
can
harder.
be interesting if you try. He's so white bread most of the time,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
if you write him as a man who hates the future, but he has no alternative, he's stuck here. He pines for the past.
Mhm.
He pines for
Mhm.
everything he's lost, and
My favorite interpretation of Captain America was in the Ultimates storyline.
Mhm.
That was can't remember the guy who wrote those now.
Mark Millar.
Yeah, Millar. And just because he was like this military guy that had that, he was very much a man of the 60s dealing with today. So he had like, he was like the epitome of the greatest generation stuck today
Right.
and not really
Right.
learning, not really understanding what had come between the change of generations. Just looking at all these people and like, oh, these kids are crazy. Look at that. He's like an old man stuck in a young body. So I always
yep,
found
Mhm.
that that's
Mhm.
interesting. That sort of conflict of like,
Yeah.
I remember one of the stories. I think Ant-Man gets in a domestic fight with his wife, and so
Yeah.
Captain America just goes out and beats the crap out of him because that's what you would do in the 60s. You would just go be a man. And so I just say, okay, that is very
That's
interesting character
interesting.
because it's not good or bad. It's just like
Right.
this is what he would do.
That's what he would do.
Yeah,
That brings me to the next subject I want to come up with is the Black Widow movie. You know, interestingly, you have again a leading character, as you mentioned, Aaron, who
yeah.
a lot of people would interpret as a villain. I mean, Black
In
Widow
the
is a
comics,
trained
she was.
assassin, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, how in what universe is a trained assassin a good guy? Well, if in this case she's written many times as trying to make up for things she's done in the past by joining the Avengers and doing what she can to save people instead of killing people, and then
yeah,
through the course of the story, we see that very much in the tradition of La Femme Nikita,
yeah.
she's taken as a young person and abused and trained to be a killer by this evil group that runs a place called the Red Room. And it's led by basically a crime lord who is very suspiciously looks like Harvey Weinstein. Did anybody else get that? I got that.
The other thing too is I never quite understood. Does he? Maybe it should be. Does he rent his assassins out to do jobs? Do they work as a team? Like he's got all these
I think he
assassins, but
topples regimes and that sort
yeah,
of thing.
is that what he does?
Yeah, he
Okay,
topples
Hmm.
regime. He basically rules the world from this satellite by manipulating, threatening, intimidating. I mean, he's the godfather with Black Widow enforcers.
did it seem a little forced that it was only women that he trains? I mean, I know that's in the whole line with Black Widow, but it seemed like was there something unique about women that he would only train them?
Yeah,
That was
they're
not
unassuming.
explained. I didn't
That
think.
yeah,
Go ahead, Rob.
they're
I never got that
I
understanding.
think.
non-threatening,
Go ahead,
non-threatening,
Bob.
and non-threatening and unassuming, and you constantly uh, underestimate them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know this movie had a lot of political overtones, like getting into that, so I know there's a lot of stuff there with that were built right into the movie. I was like, okay. Um, but yeah, I just didn't know if they were saying anything genetically, like, or why he only did that. I'd be kind of curious to see if there was some sort of reasoning, like maybe they were more susceptible to the brainwashing than the males, or I don't know, just something weird. I mean, I just would have been kind of interesting because I'm just like, it really was kind of like you have. The Brett Weinstein, you saw that, like you literally have his harem of assassins doing his bidding, and I'm like,
I
okay.
think it's more political
Yeah,
Yes,
oriented.
much more political
much more
oriented.
political. They obviously they made a big deal about the brainwashing and then the
Hmm.
antidote to the brainwashing. Those were the
Yeah, that was
weapons.
weird.
That
Yeah.
wasn't it?
I
That
don't
was.
really understand why they went about it like that unless we were supposed to feel sorry for everybody.
I think partly
So,
that. I also think that they got away from the core story that was fascinating to me was the dysfunctional family aspect of it. I thought that was
Yeah.
great.
mhm,
I thought,
yeah,
you
they
know,
got down
her
into that.
her foster parents and the crazy dad who ends up being the Red Guardian, who was the anti Captain America, and he's kind of a doofus, played by perfectly by David Balfour. He's just the perfect
Yeah.
character actor to play that.
I thought he was hilarious.
It was
So,
Yeah.
so
does he play it like he's really just lost it with age? Is it
Yeah,
a comedic tone?
very much a Big Lebowski type of, he's done, he's lost it. He used to be cool and he's out of it, and he's been in prison all these years and just doesn't know his place anymore, and he's acting just kind of, I don't know, obtuse, constantly
Yeah.
obtuse. And it was
Mhm.
really fun to watch them interact. Brent, share with us, what do you think of Black Widow? As far, well, talk about it a little bit in terms
Okay.
of the family issues too.
I will say it's funny they cast David Harbour as the Red Guardian because they did you guys see some of the ads? They were like the first MCU hero with a dad bod. So that was
Yeah,
great.
was that okay? Was that what they were talking about? I didn't see that.
Oh
That's funny.
gosh.
Yeah. So
That's
um,
funny.
I was also going to add one interesting thing about movie or people who watch media is it's been proven that a young girl in jeopardy gets more sympathy than a young boy in danger. So I'm sure that probably played in. If you know the scene at the
Yeah.
beginning with Natasha and her sister and in the big shipping container. That's
Yes.
like, dude,
Oh
that's
yeah.
so wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, for whatever reason. So um, what else? Just say anything about it.
Well, yeah,
Um,
the family interaction I thought was
the
great.
family interaction was great. I will actually say the third act felt the weakest because I think Aaron's right. They didn't really spend a lot of time explaining who is this guy? Why does he have this giant network of just women? Uh, what's his end game? I still have no idea. Was
He had
he really just a
one ring.
crime boss? That's lame.
Let me
So
guess. He had the one ring to rule them all, apparently too.
yeah,
So I mean, he had the magic ring, and there was I guess I was. It would always made more sense to me if it was a woman that was training these assassins,
mm,
because I think she would then, and then the fact that he was like controlling them with like pheromones and stuff, and I
Yeah.
don't know, there was a lot of stuff. I kind of wish, I guess, in the movie I was kind of hoping for a straight up more Mission Impossible, like they had
mm,
this like elaborate mission they had to pull off for, but they kind of didn't. And that's again with, and I'm not picking on Marvel, most movies just kind of devolve into like, okay, well, we have a problem, so okay, everybody fighting, stuff blows up, and they roll the credits. And then the
yeah,
last 30 minutes of every movie is like everyone fighting. Like I remember when it used to be one fight. Now you had like what, the Red Guardian fight. There were, I mean, how many different fights are going on? To like when they go back to Red Guardian, I'm like, he's still fighting this dude. Like so, and then the stuff blowing up around them and stuff, and but it just, I think every single movie ends this way anymore. It's just stuff blowing up and people fighting and stuff,
mm,
and then you come out going like, I guess I was supposed to care about stuff. It's just me. I mean, my friend Tom hasn't seen movies in years, and he won't go see any movies just because that's his biggest gripe with all of it. It's like, it's just like a lot of stuff happens, a lot of fighting. Am I supposed to care about any of this? Because they're not giving me any reason to care. And I'm like, I totally agree with them. I mean,
I think you make a good point there that it went off the rails trying to be a fireworks spectacle when we would have been just as pleased with a lower budget. I think the film
yeah, yeah,
cost 200 million. Go lower budget and do more of a Daredevil TV series style thing where
that would have been perfect.
go
Like
into
there's
the
some
psych.
elaborate plan they had to pull off in order to
Yeah,
do this, which they
go.
kind of did that in the movie, but they kind of, then it just went into fighting and stuff. I'm like, okay,
Well, it also went into just impossible spectacle of the exploding satellite in space that's falling apart, and it became like the end of Moonraker, the James Bond movie. It just got just over the top. So, but think about if they had just focused on the family dysfunction, the actual psychological and physical fallout of being brought up by a foster spy family from
right.
Russia, and then you join an all American superhero team, and then how do you deal with all of that, as a person, and then, have a fight and have all the ending action? But why does it always have to be save the world with all that? Just either do a small
They can make
character-driven
it,
story
yeah.
or an epic giant save the world. Why do you have to try to blend all those into one?
It
I
would have
think,
been to me much more effective if, like, because they hinted that her mom betrayed her, and
yeah,
then it was weird at the end. Oh, it's a big plan, and we switched places. I'm like, okay, well, you completely defeated that point.
yeah,
I
because
mean,
you
it would
defeat
have been
that
a
point.
really cool ending if, like, her mom has a gun pointing to her and she's trying to talk her down. And the mom realizes, even though I'm not your real mother, I still have feelings for you. But
Yeah,
it was like, no, we switched masks because we happen to be the exact same size
right,
and body
right,
build. And so I'm like, okay, like I'm just like,
yeah,
this lady's in like her 50s, and
yeah,
the guy who's such a crime boss is watching her walk. Like, that's obviously the body of a 30-year-old.
yeah.
I mean,
It
I
just,
don't.
yeah. I think
So
you're right. I think
I
you're
mean, you
right.
could
Went
just
off the
look at her
rails.
hands. You can look at her hands and just be like, that's not hands of a 30. So there was like, that was like, I mean, you could have done like this sort of, because that was a dysfunctional family. And at the
Yeah,
end, they were like, could have like, okay, I'm sorry. And then maybe the mom would have killed the bad guy to sacrifice herself to save her daughter, which showed that she really loved her, whatever. But it just didn't do any of that.
yeah, yeah. Good point. Good point.
That's one,
Brent.
So,
or they could have gone in the direction of we're all victims and we have to be there for each other. Like
yeah.
the family dynamic was kind of interesting, except it also felt a little bit shoehorned in because mom went off and was doing her experiments. Dad was in jail, and apparently they didn't care about each other at all because they didn't try to break each other out. They didn't try to stay in contact, and suddenly they're all back together, and it's like they're almost overlaying the whole thing with a funny family dynamic because it's funny. But really, in a story sense, it didn't have enough undergirding to make very much sense.
I
So it
think
seemed
what,
it was play for
yeah.
laughs, and that was about it. Which is
I
too
think it would
bad.
have been much more impactful if that it's who was the taskmaster was her
Yeah,
mother. I thought like that was her mother, like brainwashed. That would have been great, and instead it's this guy's daughter,
Yeah.
which we see on the screen for like 2 seconds. But I mean, if
Right.
she would have tore off her mask and she was trying to talk her out and she's brainwashed as this taskmaster and he's been using her mother as a weapon the whole time, I mean, that would have been much more effective than like he's using his own daughter. And I'm like, okay, that's great and horrible, but I don't know the villain as hardly as I know his daughter. So I have no reference of, it's
yeah.
tragic, but there's no emotional connection to be much more emotionally connected if it was like Scarlett Johansson's mother.
Well, and
So,
and to add insult to injury, I think the film underperformed because it cost 200 million. They spent 100 million on the promotion stuff because it was supposed to be released last summer, and then COVID happened and all that. And then they did a simultaneous release in theaters and with Disney Plus. And my gossip sources tell me that Disney lost money on it, and now Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney because
yeah.
she says she was harmed financially because the simultaneous release on streaming and in the theaters yielded less income than was expected, and she signed the contract under the understanding that originally they were going to do a delayed release, like it was going to be in theaters for a while and then go streaming. And so there's a lot of politics and a lot of
Yeah, I heard
angst.
that she.
Yeah.
Now maybe it's wrong. I heard that she got no kickback from the release on demand. She was
I
only
heard
supposed
that
to
as
get money from the
well.
movie release, and
I
then
heard
the,
that.
Oh, that's even worse. No wonder she's mad.
Yeah,
and then basically when they brought it out on demand and everyone just streamed it, she got no kickback from it. And it's
right,
like, wait,
right,
what?
right.
So yeah,
And then don't feel too sorry for her. I mean, ScoJo made 20 mil just to be in the movie, so she's not hurting.
well, yeah, but I mean it's definitely a precedent where
Right.
she's the one doing most of the work. She's running
Yeah,
around doing
she's the
stunts or
star.
whatever. You're right.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
whether she's rich or not, I think is it's you could always argue that into it. It's just the fact that somebody signed something in good faith, and some other company's trying
Absolutely
to
right. If they
any
promised her
job
one
somebody
thing
did
and
any
did
job would
something
be wrong.
else. Yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Regardless of it, and so yeah, I don't know. I like. I remember in the comics, Black Widow was a traitor. They never did that storyline. I think in every Marvel Avengers story, she ends up betraying them at some time, which I thought would have been kind of an interesting take. But they didn't do that, which I was like, okay. And they never really even used her stinging wristbands that much, did
No,
they?
they didn't.
They put them on her, but they never did the fact that that was her main. And I was like, really? That's. I mean, you can make a man fly around in a suit of armor, but you can't do the wristband thing. I mean, I don't. I mean, I know you got the technology to do this, so yeah, I never quite. Because I thought like, wouldn't it have been cool if like you had, Hawkeye had all the different arrows. Like you could have like different darts in each one. They could like spin around in a wrist. You could do like different like fire darts or gas, and you could do all sorts of cool. But it's like no, you get glow sticks and a gun. Like go
Right.
fight.
Pretty much.
And
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't get the glow
And
sticks. I mean,
boots.
I understand like the martial arts, but it just you're giving her sticks. I mean, I
Yeah.
just how threatening can she be? Will they glow? I guess that's threatening, right? Um,
Well, but the
It's
cool thing about Black Widow isn't that just her tech. I mean, she was the one. If you think about it, you know, in the Avengers, she totally should have been like sidelined. You take your little pistols and you go and you pop up a couple of aliens, and we'll let the big guys handle stuff. But she's the one who kept vaulted onto the sled that got
yeah,
to the what's it called, the thing that was keeping the hole in space open, all that stuff. I mean, in other words, you don't just send up anybody. You send up the Black Widow. She's that good. She can think on
yeah.
her feet.
Mhm.
She's a great fighter. She knows how to roll with stuff.
I
Uh,
thought she was a cool character. I mean, I like her.
yeah,
I was so surprised they never introduced the Wasp at the beginning. Why is she coming? She was one of the original Avengers. Like, why at the very end are they just now introducing through Ant Man?
I think they were saving that for because she's so connected to Ant-Man and
Yeah,
Ant Wasp. They wanted to really keep those
yeah.
two sort of as their own couple.
I know Disney by most of the time just because of Disney have taken out all the negative aspects of the characters. Tony's not an alcoholic. She's not a traitor.
Hmm.
There's no domestic abuse between Ant Man and the Wasp. Which kind of made those characters interesting. But you know,
yeah.
whatever. It's a different universe, I guess. Take it as you will.
It is.
Um,
It is different.
yeah,
And at this point, I'd like to sort of bring the discussion to a close. I appreciate everyone joining tonight, and I want to thank you guys for being here, and thank everyone for being here. And we had a great discussion. We want everyone to go check out silverlinecomics.com. Check out all these new creative books. I want everybody to sign off. And as we say goodnight, tell us about where they can find your books, Barb.
You can find my books on any Kickstarter that Silverline runs. We are currently in between right now. Again, excuse me for yawning. It's been a long
Sure.
week. You can order any of the Kickstarter books on any of the Kickstarters that we run as an add-on. You can also find them through silverlinecomics.com. It will lead a link to Indie Planet where you can order them. Or find me at a convention. I will be at Dallas, not Dallas, Daytona Beach Comic Con in September. Sorry. Um, Along with a whole bunch of other Silverline people, you'll be able to actually buy the books and have them signed.
Awesome. Brent, what about you? Where can they find your books?
Pretty much everything Barb said.
Okay.
Silverline Comics. Is it silverlinecomics.com?
Yes, it is.
There you go. And
Silverline Comics.
yeah,
Are you going to be at the Daytona Beach Comic
that's the
Convention?
plan.
Okay.
It's 2 days, right?
Yep. Everybody come see Barb and Brent. What about Aaron? What about you? Are you going to be there?
I am looking into it. I am still this time. I should be, but there might be stuff getting in the way. That's something I have to talk to Volan
In the
about.
meantime, they can find your books at silverlinecomics.com
Yeah,
as
you can
well.
find Fire Rush there, and then I have my own store, Humphrey's Illustration, at bigcartel.com, where you
Okay.
can buy my kids' books and my comics and all that. And then Facebook, and then Instagram. Humphrey's Illustration for both Facebook and Instagram. I finally changed my Instagram handle, so now it's the same. Yay!
Awesome.
So
Okay.
Awesome. Robbie, what about you? Where can we see your work?
Well, I just came off a Kickstarter that completed just last week, so you can probably find it now on indieplanet.com, and the comic is the Silver Line Team Up Champion and Miss Fury.
Absolutely.
So that is, yeah, should be up on Indie Planet.
Fantastic. We had a great show last week talking about those books, and so everybody go out and get your Silverline comics and check us out. And as we sign out, we always like to say, make
Make
mine
mine
Silver.
Silverline.
Silverline.
And we're out. Good night, everybody.